Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Fortune from Tribeca New Music, and I'm here with Felix Reyes, who will be performing as part of the Pathos Trio at the Domena Center on October 28th. Thank you so much for being here. It's so great to meet you over Zoom. So first off, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and then also how the Pathos Trio came to be?
Yeah, just to talk a little bit more about Pathos. So, originally the group came to be, the group was actually a duo at first. So it was myself and then Marcelina Suchocka was the other percussionist in Pathos. And we basically met up around in the fall of 2017. This was shortly after I actually moved and finished grad school and moved out to Brooklyn. And around that time, I was basically looking for other percussionists that were like-minded, like I was, in terms of like what my general interests in percussion chamber music are, and then also in terms of music that I'm interested in, like outside of like classical chamber new music. So Marcelina came up on my radar. I had reached out to her, and then we met up. We played a little bit. And then from there, we kind of realized that we had like a very, very unique chemistry. And when it came to just with like interests and playing and kind of, and just musical interests. So the group was originally a duo, and then shortly after we became a duo, we were thinking of composers because from both of our backgrounds, we were used to while in musical school, working with living composers and doing commissions, and things of that nature. So we had thought about composers to reach out to, and then one of the folks that came to mind for me was Alan Hankers, who was our original pianist in the trio and composer. And we reached out to him to write Pathos's first piece. But then and then as he was writing the piece, he sort of had a lot of just natural ideas as he was writing and expanding on the piece, and he basically approached me and Marcelina and asked us like, hey, well, I've been writing both of your guys' duo pieces, but I've been getting a lot of interesting ideas to incorporate piano in it. Like, would you two be interested in like me adding piano to the piece and then having me play alongside you guys? And we're like, oh yeah, sure, of course. And, he showed us like the MIDI demos of what was our very first piece, Distance Between Places, which we later recorded with 410 Media. But basically through that collaboration with Alan, it kind of just like naturally things came into place. And then as we were working with Alan on the piece together as a trio, we then like quickly realized, okay, there's this really just natural, like strong chemistry here between the three of us. And yeah, we're all just like on the same page about just musical interest. And, we kind of came to the sort of conclusion that, okay, we should make this not just like a one-off thing for this project, but like actually have this group be a trio now. And then, and then from there, things kind of like took off.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, everything's better in threes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's great to hear from a percussionist perspective, how does piano kind of connect you all three together? And how does percussion connect the piano to it? I mean, it's cool to see your inspiration came from a pianist composing for you. I mean, that collaboration must be really important, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess I wouldn't necessarily say like that there's like inspiration from the piano per se, but the thing that really brought me, Marcelina, and then eventually Alan together was that, as I mentioned before, I came from where I did my master's in contemporary music performance. I did my master's out in Bowling Green State University, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with the program, but they have a very strong contemporary new music program. Like they have the Mid Center for Contemporary Music, and they're Bowling Green, Ohio, in the Midwest. And then Marcelina, at that time, she was just finishing up her master's when I first met her at Manhattan School of Music, And so obviously, they also have, I mean, even though she's more focused on orchestral music, but, they have a very strong contemporary new music program. And she was very much, while studying at MSM, involved with, again, as I mentioned before, working with living composers all the time student composers and premiering like student compositions and that sort. And then with Alan, obviously, being a composer, he also was finishing at the time his doctorate in composition at Stony Brook. So there was this kind of trifecta of all three of us coming from very strong contemporary new music backgrounds, being classically trained musicians. But then on top of that, we all had the very similar interest in music, where outside of contemporary classical music, we all are, I guess to say, for like lack of better terms, we're all like big metalheads. So we all had this overlap in terms of interest in like darker, heavier music. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be influenced for like heavy metal or anything, but that was kind of like the starting point. So like, we all have similar interests from other genres of music, whether it's like electronic music, like minimalist music, synthwave music, but like just any aesthetic elements of like heavier, darker, pulling these sort of elements from like non-classical contemporary genres of music. That was sort of our thing, and that's kind of like the premise of what the trio, what we focus on in terms of like then commissioning composers to kind of pull those elements, through like their vernacular.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating, definitely looking on your website. And I was going to ask about this sort of dark, sonorous kind of experience that you like to have in the music, and the inspiration that you pull from metal, that you pull from sort of darker, expressive tones. And I think it's also interesting to think of percussion in the history of, humanity in our time. It's used a lot to really, create those deep sounds and also promote, more of a dark edge. And so I think it's really cool that you guys are not only promoting contemporary music, but you also have what the young ones would say, like a vibe going on, which I think is great, because in contemporary music, being specific can actually make things much more understandable for your audience.
I think with the program that we're going to be like presenting alongside Liam's piece, I think it's going to be an interesting and good program that like what we're going to be presenting between Ian Chang's Mega Cicada, which was like it's a more recent piece that we just put out in our most recent album, Polarity. That's a piece where it's very much in the realm of like pulse, like pulsate. Like it's very rhythmic, very pulsating. Definitely electronic based. And then with Will Healy doing some of his own solo piano sonata compositions, and then there's definitely elements in what we're going to be presenting with also Finola Merivale's Falling Flames piece, which that piece it's kind of like it's influenced by NC, so there's cells within the music that we kind of all play around, and we have our own format of how we go, our own arrangement of that piece, I guess you can say. And so yeah, there's little bits of contemporary compositions that we're playing, and then also newer stuff in terms of pieces that we've commissioned, like I mentioned with Ian Chang. Cala Warnaar also is another composer on the program that we're going to be playing those also on our recent album. And again, I just think it's definitely very percussion heavy, also obviously with piano as well. But I think it's gonna work well with.
I saw the piece with Ian Chang. It has a music video, correct? Or am I thinking of someone else?
No, yeah. We have a music video for it.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed sort of like the instances at the beginning of sort of silence and then sound and then silence, and then I also noticed that it's very black and white. How did you turn that music into a visual story through the music video? Was that your choice, or was that someone else's?
No, I mean some of it was definitely kind of our choice. I think honestly it was more so like when it came to the music video for Ian's piece, we more or less collaborated with Ian and had him give us input in terms of what he was looking for visually, because he knew that we wanted to record a music video for Mega Cicada. And then he was the one who recommended us to reach out to Luigi Honrad, and he's a 3D rendering graphics artist. He's French, but he's based out of in the Tokyo area, and he was in Japan. And he does a lot of commercial work in terms of with his 3D animation, like where a lot of his 3D animation work he'll present in art galleries and exhibitions, but then also like he'll be doing moving 3D renders for clients like Sony, like bigger corporate clients. But Luigi had worked with Ian in the past on another music video project, so that was an instance where Ian suggested like, oh, if you're gonna do a music video, you should reach out to my friend Luigi who did a video of mine. I think it would be really cool for what you guys are doing, and it was just like a collaborative process between us, Ian, then eventually Luigi, and then also with 410 Media, who shot the live portion of the music video where we're all like in that industrial warehouse area and playing the piece live. And that's kind of how we always operate. Like everything we do is always super collaborative with whoever it is we're working with.
I really love that, because my personal kind of desire is to see more multimedia efforts in the contemporary world. And I know that it's a lot of it happens, but it's just sometimes hard to find, or, it's not what you want. And I really, really appreciated, the collaboration that's very clear in that video. And I think also embodies the trio that you guys have. I mean, it's all about collaboration and communication in terms of in multiple medias, not just music, but also art and visual and everything. So super cool. Do you think that is somewhere that you might go further in the future, like a visual album or something?
Well, I mean, for sure. I mean, that's definitely how we've already been kind of marketing polarity in that way, and we kind of knew this early on too, even when we released our first album, When Dark Sounds Collide, we also shot music videos for all those pieces. But the thing is, when we released that album last year, we didn't necessarily think about marketing the music videos kind of in tandem with the album itself. And so we made sure this time around, when we were putting together this album, that we put in all the time and effort to make music videos for all the tracks in this album. Like we're gonna make sure we're doing really like our due diligence and promoting them together. So it's really just honing in on that. It's not in the fact that this time around, like this album, it's not just an oral experience, but it's like a complete package. So so to speak, like it's a visual experience that you also have to be able to. And honestly, I think the way we've been sharing the tracks have been kind of more through the music videos than the audio itself. So honestly, I think most people's first like interactions with the music in Polarity have been through the music videos. So people are kind of digesting it from a visual standpoint rather than like from the audio. And that's kind of something you mentioned too, where we're very much aware of that in terms of just how people digest music and media right now. It's like especially in a place like New York City where we're based, it's like everyone's always kind of like on the go and like on their phone. So like a lot of people these days, especially like in our generation, tend to really digest things media like visually. So like we're super aware of that.
Yeah, and I think percussion is such a visual instrument as well. Or I guess you guys play a ton of instruments, but it's so visual in the way that you utilize those tools. So it's really cool. And it seems like you know a lot about sort of marketing and promoting. And one thing that Tribeca New Music really wants to support is young artists and young composers entering the professional industry. How did you approach Pathos in a business way in terms of becoming successful? Because music is incredibly important, but then how do you take it to the next step and become a successful entrepreneur in some sense, musician / entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like it's kind of hard to say that we're necessarily successful, but I think for us where we are, we're still kind of even definitely learning how to better market ourselves. That's always something that's we can always be better at doing. But I mean, like, but from over the years, what we've learned is, everybody in the trio kind of does their own part individually when it comes to, like, just what you expect, like, a lot of artists do in terms of just share like being really 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 thoughtful with, like, posts that we make, and then obviously sharing it for our own Pathos channel, but also individually in our own channels. But then also we learned a lot through when we released our first album last year, through, because obviously that was our debut album, so we that was the first experience where we got to really work with, like, a PR firm, and then through that experience we kind of were able to, this time around, with Polarity, really hone in on what just kind of the target audiences, and also just in terms of, like, press outlets, like which press outlets do we really want to be, like, spending time and trying to engage, because as you know, with our group, we kind of are in this, like, gray area. Like, we ride this fine line of, like, on paper you could say that we're like a contemporary new music two percussion piano trio, but on the other hand, you can kind of say that, especially with, like, the new music on this album that we just released, you can say, well, they're like a quasi band also, like, you could say it's like some of the tracks on there that we've released are, like, sort of experimental. It's definitely very heavily leans into, like, electronic music or synthwave music. There's some definitely elements of, like, hard alternative rock in there. So I think just, I think over time, the more we've come into our own in terms of what we're looking for, that that helps us a lot to be able to then kind of target who we're trying to reach out to, because obviously with us, we're always going to be reaching out to contemporary chamber music folks, but we also want to be accessible with, and not in a gimmicky easy way, but we want our music to be accessible to, like, non-classical chamber music audiences, and at the same time, like, really collaborate with composers to like create together commissions that are going to also challenge folks when they listen to it.
I think that was my favorite part of your website, was the outreach component of it. What kind of work do you do in that sector as well? Because I know that you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, we also, outside of, like, the concert hall and, like, outside of performances, we, like you mentioned, we have school partners that we work with, where we do, like, 5 to 6 week residency music workshop residencies, and pretty much the school partners that we do work with, there's 4 of them now that we work with within New York City, 2 in Manhattan and 2 out in like the Queens area, and then we have one school partner that we work with out in Chicago, and a school that we're in process of trying to establish a connection with down in Sarasota, Florida. These are basically just areas where, like, members of the trio kind of are based. Marcelina's based in, well, Marcelina's home is in Chicago, but I mean, she's based in Sarasota, so that's where those 2 connections come. And obviously myself and Will, being based out here in Brooklyn. So earlier on with the group, myself, Marcelina, and Alan, we all kind of came from. It was important for us to realize that as a group, we didn't want to just perform and just be a performing ensemble, but because of outside of our musical backgrounds that I mentioned before, we all kind of came from families of, I don't want to necessarily say poverty, but, like, we all came from immigrant families, and really kind of understand the importance of how we were brought up into music, and like, our teachers and folks early on in our lives who like helped us along the way to help us get to like where we are today. Like that sort of stuff kind of defines my identity, like Marcelina's identity and like Alan's identity. So outside of the performance aspect of the group, that was something that was from the get-go super important to us to be able to kind of give back, to like the communities that we sort of reside and live in. Hence, the idea to be able to do like free multi-week residencies at places, and specifically the schools that we work with. They're most, with the exception of one, they're all like they're all Title I schools that are like in high need, that don't have music or arts programs. So just kind of being able to do our part in terms of what we're able to do with our capacity, and then once or twice a year we'll also put together big community engagement projects or like fundraisers where we'll work with like a local organization to be able to then fundraise funds to give to like a non-charitable organization. So those sorts of things, again, it's not a whole lot, I would say, but again, us trying as a small trio trying to do our part, that's something that's also important to us outside of performing.
It's so important to, give back to that community that supported you in the first place. I feel like that's very commendable. Thank you for explaining that. I think it's great. I work for a free music school as well, and so I'm very invested in the educational portion of contemporary music, because I definitely think there's an audience for it.
Yeah.
So pivoting a slight bit, but what advice would you give, and going back to sort of, success and being able to do what you love, what would you recommend someone watching this video to do to really pursue whatever they want to?
I would just, yeah. I mean, honestly, just if you have a goal or something in mind that you want to do, just go for it and do it. I know it's easier said than done, but I think, kind of tying back to what I was just saying a little while ago, that I think because of like how I was brought up, and how Marcelina was brought up and Alan was brought up, we came from households and communities where we kind of started from a place where we didn't really have a whole lot in terms of resources, and how and our upbringings into music. Like, for example, like for me, I grew up in a school district where in Brentwood, New York, outside of the city in the Long Island area. That I grew up in that school district where, in relation to other school districts around me, I had peers my age from other school districts who would learn how to play and pick up an instrument, like, let's say, like first and second grade, and because of the lack of resources and funding in the arts in my school district in Brentwood, I didn't learn how to play or pick up drumsticks until I was a freshman in high school. So I started very late in comparison to a lot of other, a lot other folks my age. But then because of like, my teachers who I was fortunate enough to like have had at that school district, who were very passionate about who were very passionate about wanting to really instill and give those students who didn't have like opportunities at an earlier age to be exposed to music, like that, then kind of compelled and drove me to really just kind of like myself, Marcelina, and Alan came from sort of similar environments. Obviously Marcelina immigrated from an early age from Poland. Like, her parents brought her over to Chicago in the States so she can be able to then have good opportunities to be able to like study music. And so we've all had this hard work ethic, and like we've always, all three of us, just kind of just naturally a bit, well, I wouldn't say naturally, but like we were kind of instilled like being self-driven. And so, for anyone watching, just, yeah, if you have something in mind, like or goal that you want to do. You just gotta, there's not like a clear path in front of you to be able to like pursue something. You just, it's like one of those things where when there's a will, there's a way. You just have to, if you have an idea in mind, just go for it. And if there's not a clear path, if you're really passionate about that particular thing you want to do, you're gonna trip, you're gonna fall, you're gonna stumble, and there'll definitely be times where you might not think that goal is achievable or possible. But if you really just stick to it and have that benchmark, and even the process itself of getting to that particular place, it might not be exactly the way you imagine. Like you might end up there might be other doors that open along the way to where you eventually get to that place. But yeah, you just got to be able to have that goal in mind and just persevere and just like, keep your eye on the prize and then just go for it. And don't let anyone like bring you down, or even your family, even your parents. Like don't let people bring you down if you have a goal, and just go for it.
Thank you. It was so nice to talk to you, especially, after that rousing. I'm feeling very inspired right now. So I'm very excited to see you at the Tribeca New Music performance at the Dimena Center for the Arts on October 28th at 7 p.m. And I'm very much looking forward to the performance. Thank you so much for being here and representing Pathos.